Moving into Oak Hollow was supposed to be the start of something peaceful. After years of city noise, cramped apartments, and inconsiderate neighbors, I finally had the keys to my dream home. A modest two-story house with a big backyard, tall oaks lining the driveway, and space to breathe. I moved in with my German Shepherd Max, and the hope that small-town suburbia might offer some quiet. I couldn't have been more wrong. On the second day, just as I was unpacking a box of tools in the garage, I heard someone clearing their throat. Loudly. I turned to find a woman standing on the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, her lips pinched into a permanent scowl. She wore a visor, pastel blouse, and khakis so stiff they looked starched with anger. "Hi, I'm Karen," she said, not smiling. "Head of the Oak Hollow HOA. We need to talk about your mailbox." I blinked. "My mailbox?" "It's black," she said, like I'd painted it neon green. "The standard for the neighborhood is dark bronze, page 7 of the community guidelines." I wanted to laugh, but something about her expression told me she wasn't joking. "Well, I just moved in. Haven't had time to read all the guidelines yet." "That's not an excuse," she snapped. "We keep things orderly around here. If you don't follow the rules, it creates a precedent." I nodded slowly. "Sure. I'll look into it." But that wasn't the end. Not even close. By the end of the first week, I had received 3 written HOA notices. One for excessive noise, Max barking when the mail came. One for unapproved vehicle, my pickup truck wasn't parked inside the garage. And one for unsightly yard maintenance. I left a rake out overnight. It was laughable, or would have been if it didn't feel so targeted. None of the other houses seemed to follow these rules so strictly, especially not Karen's, whose trash cans were always visible by her garage. I tried to be civil. I trimmed the lawn more often. I made sure Max didn't bark for long. I even researched the exact bronze mailbox she wanted, but Karen wasn't interested in compromise. A week later, the intimidation escalated. I came home from work to find a police cruiser parked in front of my house. A tall, broad-shouldered man in uniform stood talking with Karen, who was all smiles now. When I pulled into my driveway, the officer turned and approached me. "Evening, sir," he said. "I'm Officer Doug. Got a few concerns reported about your property." Karen hovered nearby, pretending not to listen, but very clearly listening. "What kind of concerns?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Noise complaints, a possible zoning violation due to that truck of yours. And there was mention of suspicious activity in the evenings." I stared at him. "Suspicious activity? You mean me taking my dog for a walk after dinner?" Doug didn't answer. He adjusted his belt and looked around my yard like he was trying to find a reason to be there. Karen piped up. "We just want to keep the neighborhood safe." Some of the other board members were concerned. It was clear what was happening. Karen had a friend in uniform, and she wasn't afraid to use him. From that day on, Officer Doug became a regular presence. He'd cruise slowly past my house, windows down. Sometimes he'd park across the street and just sit there. Once, when I was washing my car, he stopped and asked if I had a permit to use the hydrant. I didn't. I wasn't using it either. Another time, I came home late and found a warning stuck on my windshield for improper parking, even though I was well within the curb. It felt like harassment. It was harassment. But proving it? That was a different story. Karen, of course, maintained plausible deniability. She sent more notices. She even showed up once to warn me about a decorative gnome I'd placed by my front steps. "Not HOA approved," she sniffed. "It lowers property values." I started documenting everything, every notice, every time Doug's cruiser idled in front of my place. I installed a motion-activated doorbell camera. I began taking pictures of other homes that violated the same rules I was being fined for, with no consequences. I tried speaking to the HOA board, but they were either Karen's puppets or afraid of her. She had lived there for over a decade. I was just the new guy. That's when I realized I wasn't going to win this with politeness. I needed a plan. The breaking point came one night around 10 p.m. Max was out back doing his business when he suddenly started barking like crazy. I stepped out and saw movement at the edge of the yard, someone in dark clothes near the fence. My heart jumped. I called out, "Hey, who's there?" The figure paused, then stepped into the light. It was Officer Doug. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked. He held up his hands. "Just checking on something. Heard a report of a possible break-in." "At my house." He didn't answer. That's when I knew something had to change. This wasn't just neighborly disagreement. It was a targeted campaign. Karen was using the HOA as a weapon, and Doug was her muscle. But they had made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. I'd spent years managing security systems for commercial clients. I knew how to build a case, how to document patterns of behavior, and most importantly, how to stay calm while doing it. By the time Doug left that night, I had the whole encounter recorded, from my camera by the back gate and the one at my front door. Crystal clear. It was time to fight back. I didn't sleep much after the backyard incident. Even though Officer Doug technically hadn't broken any laws, he claimed he was responding to a call, it felt wrong, intrusive, like he was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push me before I pushed back. What kind of neighborhood was I living in, where the HOA could summon a cop to silently patrol your property at night? The next morning, I filed a formal complaint. Not against Doug, not yet, but with the HOA. I sent an email, respectfully requesting the board clarify whether it was appropriate for the HOA president to bring police onto private property without a specific incident or resident request. I copied Karen and the entire board. No one replied. Instead, 2 days later, I received another violation notice in the mail. Subject: excessive exterior lighting. Apparently, the motion sensor floodlight I'd installed near the back gate was disruptive to neighbor comfort and not in line with the community's aesthetic standards. Right. The real issue wasn't the light, it was what the light had caught. I started seeing Officer Doug more often. He wasn't even subtle anymore. His cruiser would idle in front of my house for 20-30 minutes at a time. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes after sunset. Occasionally, he'd get out, stretch, and pretend to check his tire pressure, while glancing at my door. And always, without fail, Karen would walk by shortly after. She'd wave to him, chat briefly, laugh loudly enough for me to hear through my windows. It was a coordinated performance. My neighbors began to notice too. One afternoon while I was watering my hedges, an older woman from 2 houses down, Mrs. Connors, approached quietly. "Don't mean to pry," she said gently, "but is everything okay? That officer seems to be here a lot lately." I gave her a tight smile. "Just a bit of neighborly tension, I think." She frowned. "You know, Karen did something similar to the Harris family a few years back. Called code enforcement on them 5 times in 1 month. They moved out within 6. That confirmed it. I wasn't her first target, but I intended to be her last. It was time to step up my documentation game. I upgraded my home security system, adding 2 more cameras with wide-angle views. Every HOA letter went into a special folder. Every interaction with Officer Doug was logged, with dates, times, and notes. Then I began collecting footage, not just of my property, but the rest of the neighborhood. I recorded violations that were being ignored: boats in driveways, illegal flagpoles, trash bins left out for days, barking dogs that weren't Max. I wasn't going to confront the board with petty arguments. I was going to confront them with proof of selective enforcement. But it wasn't just Karen and Doug I was preparing for. I was readying myself for something bigger: legal action. I contacted a local civil attorney, Melissa Langston. She specialized in HOA disputes and law enforcement overreach, exactly the combo I needed. After reviewing the footage and documents, her words were simple. "You've got a solid harassment case, and possibly one for civil rights violations depending on what else we dig up about this officer." We filed an official cease and desist letter against Karen, demanding she cease all direct communications and HOA violations until the board reviewed the evidence of targeting and bias. We also submitted a public records request to obtain Officer Doug's disciplinary history, patrol logs, and complaint records. That's when things really heated up. A week later, I came home to find something odd. My mailbox, yes, the infamous bronze one, had been smashed, dented, split open, and left hanging at a crooked angle like it had been punched with a crowbar. I checked the footage. No surprise. Karen's son, Tyler, a 19-year-old who still lived at home, was caught in full view swinging something heavy before jogging back toward his house. I handed the footage over to the police. But guess who showed up to handle the report? Officer Doug. This could have been anyone, he shrugged, looking at the footage I'd cued on my tablet. Can't say for sure who that is. Low lighting, blurry. It's Tyler. That's your buddy Karen's son, I said, barely hiding my irritation. You're not even going to question him? Doug's mouth twitched. We'll look into it. He didn't. Nothing happened. But that was okay, because everything was still being recorded. Every brush off, every ignored complaint, every moment of favoritism. Doug had just turned a simple HOA dispute into a police misconduct case, and he didn't even realize it. Karen must have gotten wind of my legal maneuvering because she tried something new, a friendly approach. She showed up one morning with a fake smile and a tin of cookies. I feel like we got off on the wrong foot, she said sweetly. It's a tight-knit community, and we just want everyone to get along. I didn't even take the cookies. You've made it clear what kind of community this is, I said. We'll settle things properly, in front of people who aren't afraid of you. Her smile dropped like a stone. Is that a threat? No, that's a promise. At this point, I had everything I needed. Surveillance footage, unfair HOA violations, evidence of Doug's bias and failure to act, a lawyer who believed in the case, and now, property damage with a known suspect and police negligence. Karen and Doug had gotten too comfortable abusing their power. They believed they were untouchable. But they forgot something. I wasn't like the neighbors they'd bullied before. I wasn't backing down. I was preparing for court. And it was going to be the biggest HOA reckoning Oak Hollow had ever seen. By the time summer hit Oak Hollow, my case was solid. Every encounter with Karen, every suspicious stop by Officer Doug, every HOA violation that mysteriously only applied to me, it was all documented, backed up, and neatly organized in folders, both digital and physical. The smashed mailbox footage, the ignored police report, the cease and desist letters, all of it. What started as neighborhood pettiness had grown into something larger, a legal confrontation against abuse of power. My attorney, Melissa Langston, took it further. We're going beyond the HOA, she said. We're filing 2 separate claims, one civil suit for harassment against the HOA and Karen personally, and a second complaint against Officer Doug with Internal Affairs and the Civilian Oversight Board. Her tone was calm but razor sharp. They messed with the wrong person. We filed the civil suit first. The claim accused the HOA of selective enforcement, harassment, and violation of homeowner rights. Attached were over 30 pieces of documented evidence, photos of other violations being ignored, digital timestamps of Doug's patrols, and Karen's own written threats. The mailbox incident was front and center. Next came the formal complaint against Doug. That one was a bit more explosive. Melissa submitted everything. The footage of Doug loitering outside my house, the incident where he entered my backyard without a warrant or call, my filed report against Karen's son that Doug refused to investigate, a list of neighbors who witnessed Doug's bias. 2 days later, we got a call. Your complaint is being reviewed, the officer from Internal Affairs said, and for the duration of the investigation, Officer Douglas Maddox has been placed on administrative leave. Boom. The neighborhood started whispering. Karen still strutted around like nothing had happened, but the cracks were showing. Her flyers stopped coming. The HOA newsletters got more neutral. A few neighbors who previously avoided me started waving again. Mrs. Connors even brought over banana bread and said, "We're all quietly cheering for you." Even better, Tyler, the same punk who smashed my mailbox, had been caught on my neighbor's camera keying someone else's car down the block. Police were finally forced to take action. He was charged with vandalism. Karen's kingdom was crumbling, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. The HOA tried to file a motion to dismiss the case, claiming I was antagonistic and non-compliant with neighborhood standards. But Melissa was ready. She walked into that preliminary hearing with a 100-page binder and an iPad full of footage. Calm, prepared, and ruthless. Karen showed up with a smug grin and left pale. Melissa pointed out that not only had the HOA issued me 13 violations in 6 months, but over 20 other residents had committed the same offenses without receiving any citations. And we had the timestamps to prove it. When Karen tried to speak during the hearing, the judge interrupted. "You'll have a chance to testify, under oath. Please let your attorney speak." Karen sat back, red-faced. After that hearing, the judge denied the HOA's motion to dismiss. Discovery was granted. That meant we had access to internal HOA emails, meeting minutes, and correspondence records. And what we found next? Gold. In an email chain between Karen and another board member, she wrote, "We need to make an example of the new guy. The truck, the dog, it's all too loud. If the officer's willing to help, we'll lean on him." It was direct, coordinated, and deeply incriminating. When Melissa forwarded it to Internal Affairs, she followed it up with a single sentence. "I hope your investigators enjoy this as much as we did." Meanwhile, Officer Doug's investigation was heating up. We learned from a leaked source that Doug had 2 prior complaints for targeted patrols and unprofessional conduct, both swept under the rug thanks to Karen's influence in the local HOA community circle. But now, with video proof, written records, and public scrutiny, his past caught up to him. A neighbor from the next block, Mr. Patel, came forward and filed his own complaint. Doug had once threatened him over a supposed code violation for flying a flag outside his window. Same pattern, same abuse. Internal Affairs now had multiple complainants. Doug's badge was getting heavy. And as the evidence mounted, Karen panicked. I found a printed flyer tucked under my doormat. "Are you next? One neighbor's lawsuit is costing our HOA thousands in legal fees. Is it worth the drama?" No name, no signature, but I knew it was her. I posted a rebuttal on the neighborhood's online portal. "I believe in fair rules for everyone. This lawsuit isn't drama, it's accountability. If you're worried about HOA funds, ask the board why they're spending thousands to defend someone who abused their power." The post got 67 likes in one day. Karen didn't post again. Then came the trial date notice. It was official. Karen and the HOA were going to court. Melissa prepped me for testimony. "Stay calm. Be factual. Let the evidence speak for itself. Karen will try to provoke you. Don't let her." I nodded. I'd waited nearly a year for this moment. The fear was gone. The stress had melted into something else. Focus. The courtroom was packed when the day finally came. Karen walked in with her lawyer, looking like she hadn't slept. Doug didn't show. His hearing was scheduled separately with the police review board, but his actions would still be part of our case. I sat beside Melissa. Calm. Steady. Every neighbor's face in the gallery gave me more strength. The judge entered. The clerk called the case, and just like that, it was time to speak the truth. Under oath. The moment I stepped into the witness box, the courtroom fell quiet. It wasn't nerves that hit me, it was clarity. For nearly a year, I'd been stalked, harassed, and humiliated by a woman who used her HOA power like a weapon. And standing beside her had been a cop with a badge and no boundaries. But now they were out of the shadows. Now we were in a place where the truth couldn't be ignored. I took a breath, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Game on. Melissa began her questioning. She moved slowly, methodically, guiding me through the timeline. When did the HOA notices start? How often did they occur? When did Officer Doug begin showing up? Every answer was backed up with documents, time-stamped footage, or written HOA violations. We played video clips of Doug's cruiser sitting outside my home for 45 minutes, with no police report ever filed. Of him entering my backyard uninvited. Of Karen's son smashing my mailbox and Officer Doug refusing to act, even after seeing clear footage. The courtroom watched silently. Then came the emails. Melissa displayed a chain of HOA board messages on a big screen. One by one, she pointed out lines that made the judge's eyebrows rise. Karen's own words. He's got that smug attitude. The truck, the dog, it's all trashy. If Doug can nudge him a bit, maybe he'll leave. And, let's fine him for everything. He's not a good fit here. Melissa let the silence sit for a beat. Then she turned to the judge and said, "This isn't enforcement, it's targeted harassment." Karen's lawyer tried to push back during cross-examination, suggesting I was difficult and disrespectful of neighborhood norms. He showed photos of my dog, Max, barking behind a fence, and even a blurry image of my pickup truck parked too close to the curb. But it fell flat. Because next, Melissa showed the same violations being committed by other homes, boats in driveways, uncut grass, cars blocking sidewalks, without a single HOA notice attached. It wasn't about rules, it was about me. When Karen took the stand, the tone shifted. At first, she was polished, polite, claimed she was just trying to maintain a peaceful, orderly neighborhood. But then Melissa brought up the emails. "Did you write this?" she asked, pointing to the sentence. "If Doug can nudge him a bit, maybe he'll leave." Karen fumbled. "That was taken out of context." "Would you like to provide that context?" Karen hesitated. "I meant encourage compliance." Melissa smiled. "With police presence and harassment?" Karen's face flushed. "I never instructed Officer Doug to do anything inappropriate." And yet, Officer Doug made 17 separate visits to the plaintiff's home in 5 months. No filed incident reports, no citations, no official reason. You spoke with him frequently, correct? He's a family friend. Right. And you used your relationship with him to target a resident you personally disliked? Karen's silence said everything. After 3 days of testimony, the judge finally gave his ruling. I sat quietly while he read it aloud. The court finds clear evidence of selective enforcement, targeted harassment, and abuse of power by the Homeowners Association and its acting president, Karen Ellsworth. The evidence provided shows not only a pattern of bias, but the intentional use of local law enforcement to intimidate and harass the plaintiff. Furthermore, this court is disturbed by the casual language used in HOA correspondence to coordinate with law enforcement unofficially. The plaintiff is awarded compensatory damages of $42,000 and punitive damages of $25,000. The Homeowners Association will be responsible for all legal fees incurred by the plaintiff. Ms. Ellsworth is hereby ordered removed from her position on the board effective immediately. Boom. Karen's mouth fell open. She turned toward the back of the courtroom where a few HOA board members sat, as if waiting for someone to object. No one said a word. The gavel came down. Case closed. But it didn't stop there. Within a week, the local newspaper picked up the story. HOA, president removed after harassment lawsuit, cop under investigation. Neighbors who had once been silent started speaking up. More people came forward with complaints about Karen, some going back years. Fines, threats, manipulated meeting minutes. The new interim board promised transparency and even issued formal apologies. And Doug? Well, his case went before the Civilian Oversight Board. Internal Affairs handed down a recommendation for suspension pending disciplinary review. Within a month, Doug resigned quietly, for personal reasons. I heard he left town not long after that. Oak Hollow changed after that. My mailbox got replaced on the HOA's dime. No more tickets, No more midnight patrols. Max barked freely and no one cared. The new board, led by a woman named Teresa, called me personally to say, "We're sorry, you were right, and thank you for standing up." Funny thing is, I never wanted a fight, I just wanted to live in peace. But sometimes peace has a price. And if someone's determined to take yours away, you'd better be ready to defend it. Karen and Doug tried to turn my home into a battlefield. Instead, they turned it into their own downfall, and I walked away with my head high and my neighborhood finally quiet.